Hi guys, it's Joey. So I thought I would get on camera and do a little video and show you why I'm all alive. I'm alive! I want to thank everybody who sent me get well wishes. I was a little bit unwell for a week and a bit, but I'm fine now. And over the course of that week, because I had very little that I could do, I was very much in a state of listening and just paying attention to things when I wasn't fast asleep, to be fair. And I thought that I really wanted to do a video concerning 3 topics which have come to the fore, particularly in the news and things lately, and that is to do with the devaluing of human freedoms, of human life, of human right to choice. And it's been a very odd time energetically for these sorts of issues to be coming to the fore, and undoubtedly there's a political precedent going on with these sorts of things being thrown to distract and sensationalise. But the 3 areas that I really wanted to touch upon in this video were the breastfeeding, the negativity surrounding breastfeeding and sort of the arguments going on around that, the influx and reaction to the comedic fat shaming video, and the situation with the gay marriage licenses and the woman who refused and was sent to jail and then was out of jail and all the rest of it. I'm not going to actually say names of any of these people because I don't think they deserve any more attention than they've already got. They've already had way too much attention. But I really wanted to bring these 3 issues up, particularly as we are now in National Suicide Prevention Week, and I think that arguably all 3, if definitely not the second 2, are areas which can really cause people to feel low, to feel bullied, and when suicide starts to creep onto the mind of people who come under fire from abuse because of these key areas. In terms of a spiritual path, which I realise that might be a question, this is not going to be a witchcraft video. There is a spiritual undertone and overtone to this particular video. It's not a crafting, how best to put it, it's not a witchcraft video in the sense that the craft is your art, you know, the creation and practice of witchcraft. However, for me, spirituality is intrinsically linked to witchcraft. That's how I feel about it, and that's my opinion and I'm entitled to it. And how we behave, how we discern, how we discuss, and how we interact really becomes part of who we are as a witch, because to be a witch is to search inward, it's to work with your own energy, your own thought processes, your own personal power. And when issues like this come to the fore where they basically attack other people's personal power, I think it is something worth really discussing. The fat shaming video and the breastfeeding backlash actually interweave with one another. And that is in the sense that it's basically usually, always with breastfeeding, but usually with fat shaming, and a direct attack on women. Now, with the fat shaming, before anybody gets up in arms, there is fat shaming against men. It exists, it happens, and I can think of one meme off the top of my head, which was a teenage girl who took a picture of her in the gym, and behind her was an overweight man, and she was mocking him, and people underneath, or people had sort of appropriated that picture and made another meme out of it, saying, you know, yeah, how terrible, he's in the gym trying to do something about it, and there you are with your value judgment and being a catty little so-and-so. which actually happened with another meme to do with the breastfeeding, which I love. I love this meme. And usually memes, they leave a lot to be desired. They're just sharp, witty retorts to things, usually. But this was a play on the Joker from Batman's line. You do one thing and nobody bats an eyelid, and you do this and then everyone loses their minds. So the meme about breastfeeding was using breasts to sell everything from, I don't know, beer to gasoline or something, I can't remember, and no one bats an eyelid, but use them to breastfeed a child and everyone loses their mind. And it's so true. It's so true. And these two topics where, so there's that with the breastfeeding, and there's been a recent sort of onslaught of women coming under fire for breastfeeding. Now, I don't have personal experience with this. I do, however, have two sisters who both breastfed their children, and I've seen different reactions to this in public, even though when I was there with my sister, she was always covered, like with a blanket, but still. So we can talk a little bit about personal experience from that perspective, from a sister perspective, from a sort of outsider who's close to the woman breastfeeding, but not actually the individual. And as for fat shaming, this is what I thought when I first initially heard about this. I was like, well, this person is a comedian, right? And they were making fat shaming videos for comedic effect. So the kind of people that find pointing and laughing at fat people funny are the mean kids in school. And if you haven't grown up, learnt anything, or, matured at all since you were in high school, then you need help. This sort of thing shows a complete lack of wit as far as I'm concerned. It's like, oh, so you don't have the drive, the guts, the intellect to really drive yourself to be funny, to research, to come up with original material, to find some way of being satirical or witty or sharp or having a really unique perspective, because it's basically basic lame-ass humour that is a cheap, easy laugh, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not funny. That's really how I feel about it. That's all I really feel about it. I'm like, as far as I'm concerned, it's a subject which upsets me because I am overweight. Now, I am overweight as a result of a number of things. Some of it is absolutely my fault. Some of it is a lifetime of conditioning that I'm trying to overhaul. And abuse, and a damaged body in terms of my back is damaged, not because of me being overweight, but because of abuse. And because of that, I have a very hard time with it. So it's a struggle close to my heart, and I understand all of the sort of struggles with regards to being overweight. And the really short-sighted answer where people are like, just stop eating, you fat, is really ridiculous. Okay, so if this person stops eating, what happens? Well, we form negative attachments to food in a different way, because it is really, really easy for people who are overweight and sort of have a conflict with food to go the other direction and find themselves the victim of anorexia and bulimia, amongst the variety of illnesses that surround these two ideas. I've known people who were overweight and became so hurt, so desperate, that they got addicted to diuretics and laxatives. And I know one girl who, by the time I met her, she was slim, like probably almost Hollywood slim. And to anyone that asked, she got slim on cigarettes, coffee and laxatives. But she was slim and she stopped eating, so that's right? No, it isn't at all. And being overweight is a real difficult thing to really curb and change, because you have to keep eating. It's just about re-educating yourself, relearning what to eat. Growing up, I was desperate to know what healthy was for a while in my teenage years, because I was convinced that the food we were eating was not healthy, and it wasn't. And I would hear all about these health and fitness freaks, and I just wanted to know what was healthy and how I could be a little bit more like that. And unfortunately, the information that is available to you is so vast and so conflicting that it becomes a nightmare trying to figure out what is healthy and what is not. And I refuse to listen to anybody who's like, oh, you just eat fruit and you're healthy. Because as I researched into it, I was like, okay, well, I quite enjoy salad, right? So I really like salad. But you read about, if you're eating certain types of salad, if you're eating certain bagged salads, it's actually really, really negative effect on your health, because some of them, and this is years back when I was reading about this, were washed in chlorine. And there's a book, and I've forgotten what it's called. It's something to do with the food industry and things, that was 15 times more strong than what's in a swimming pool, is what some of the salads were washed with. And it's not healthy to eat bag salad and then and outside of growing your own in your garden, which I can't do, it's like, what the hell? And then you have conflicting advice on water. Is bottled water good for you? Is bottled water bad for you? Do you get certain kinds of poisoning from that thing? What about the water that comes out of the tap? Because there's a whole load of different studies. Yeah. And I'm not having a discussion about meat eaters versus vegetarians in this video. I'm not having it. And so there are people who insist that you must be vegetarian to be perfectly healthy. There are people who insist you must be raw to be healthy. And it all becomes really, really headachy. And if you're anything like I am, you get to a point where you just get so sick of it all, you're like, sod it. I cannot be bothered with this anymore, because everything I'm reading is conflicting. I can't find a definitive thing, and it's driving me mad. No, not to mention the emotional sort of triggers with regards to being overweight, and where that comes into comfort eating and all this sort of emotional baggage which becomes attached to food. And it's just human beings. We naturally integrate food into every aspect of our emotional lives. So like, sit and really think about it, right? Birthday parties, some of the earliest memories that most of us will have of, you know, celebration. What were your special birthday things that you used to have on your birthday? Is there a particular kind of meal that you have even now just on your birthday because it's a special occasion? The family getting together around the table for what meal? You, in your own head, you know, and it'll be different for different people, but it's all tied very much into an emotional response. So the idea of just stop eating is the most stupid thing I have ever heard, and I don't want to hear it ever again. Apart from anything, it's basically going to be a balance between healthy eating and exercise. And for me, my body needs exercise to lose weight, because whilst I was sick with tonsillitis and couldn't do any exercise, I gained weight. Quite a bit of weight, which I have since literally in the last 4 days, because I've been able to move around and go on walks and things, has come off again. But that's my body in a nutshell. If I'm not exercising, I'm gaining weight, and that is my body. It doesn't matter how much I diet, if I'm not doing the exercise, it doesn't matter. Just diet alone would not do anything for me, and I've tried, so there you go. That alongside breastfeeding. So breastfeeding, I've mentioned the meme. So when my sister was breastfeeding and covering herself up with a blanket, the reactions of men seem to be very different from the reactions of women, and I apologise for people to whom this is not the case, but this is what I saw. Older women from sort of middle-aged and particularly elderly women were very, very supportive of breastfeeding in public, even though my sister was always completely covered with a blanket, so there was no naked boob to offend anybody's delicate sensibilities on show. And like some old women actually said to her, you know, it's really good to see the young generation going natural and doing things properly, and that was their opinion on it. And some middle-aged women were quite similar, but we had men telling us it was unnatural. And what could be more natural than feeding your child with the bodily, natural given device for which to feed your children? But hey, you know, whatever. And then younger minds were exactly the same mentality. So, the reason that I say that these two things are interlinked is because it is a devaluation of the human spirit, the human experience, and the human body. It is basically making out that the human beings, particularly women, but it happens to men in terms of their physical attractiveness as well, are only a sum of their parts. They are only as valuable as what is outside, and that's it. It's controlling people through the shallow belief of what their shell is, and as if that is all that they are. This, in my opinion, is a form of sort of dogmatic repression, because if you're focusing on what you look like, how much makeup you're wearing, how thin you are, how you're not focusing on anything else around you. It's a form of control by those out there, and it's big effing business. It's a big capitalist industry that is diet pills, gyms, everything that goes around it, makeup, clothes, branding off the idea of being very, very thin, and on and on and on and on and on. There are a lot of industries that make their money, particularly off the being too fat thing, and basically they don't want you to achieve a realistic idea of what you should be like, healthy, because if you're healthy and happy with yourself, then you're not buying all the diet pills, you're not buying all the books, you're not buying all this, that and the other, you're not trying to get thinner, and it's a horrible system which to me feels pretty corrupt and pretty ugly in of itself. It sort of devalues the human being and doesn't allow any sort of, doesn't allow for the human spirit, it doesn't allow for human emotion, it doesn't let anybody be valued for who they are as a human being, because you're being judged on the measurement of your thighs or something. And then for the other side of this is breastfeeding, and that's basically the over-sexualization of women to the point where they're doing what they're meant to be doing with their breasts in terms of nature. You know, do whatever you want with your breasts, it's not my business, but paint them up and do the hula for all I care. But in terms of nature, they're designed for breastfeeding. So there's outrage on the streets when a woman feeds her child from the breast, but everywhere you go there is the over-sexualization of women to a ridiculous degree, and boobs are used for everything. Now, I am not a prude, I'm not sexually ashamed at all. I think breasts are awesome. I think, you know, if you got them, shake them, doesn't matter to me. If you got them, then shake them. I don't know what that was about. I have no idea. But it doesn't bother me in the slightest, like how, I mean, it bothers me when very, very young girls are dressed up way too old with everything hanging out, because I think that's a loss of innocence way too young and an over-sexualization of women. But if you are in a confident place and you're just dressing how you want to, then you do what you want. However, there is this over-sexualization of women in society, which means when they're performing the natural function, they are demonized, and therefore, you know, when they're stepping outside of this sort of societally given role, back to the Earth Mother type role, then society resists and promotes this idea that somehow it's ugly, it's wrong, it's demonized. And that for me brunts against my spirituality, because the whole point of breastfeeding is it is an Earth Mother energy. It's just naturally feeding your child. Now, I will admit to you, as a teenager, for many, many years, I was kind of horrified at the idea of breastfeeding. Some of it is because my mother told me a load of horror stories about breastfeeding way too young, and basically it frightened the out of me, like bleeding cracked nipples and all this, that and the other. And undoubtedly, while that sort of thing does happen to mothers, it's probably nowhere near as bad as she made it out. But for a long time I was kind of horrified by the whole idea, and that is something I had to overcome, because I'd basically been conditioned to find the idea a little bit squeamish, a little bit ugh. And when I really sat and thought about it, I was like, but boobs are awesome, and you know, I'm a straight woman, I prefer men, obviously, but boobs are awesome, and I have no problem with boobs, so where is this sort of weird quirk coming from? And it's this weird conditioning that goes on in society that you just have to realise is there, overcome, and say, you know what, women, look after your babies, do the best by your kids. And again, it's a choice, you know, I'm not saying that all women must breastfeed their children, because it's not up to me, it's a choice for each individual to make. However, women should have the right to make that choice. Okay, and finally, the gay marriage licenses, which is a sidestep slightly, but it is, again, the media frenzy surrounding a woman who has basically trying to make a case for bigotry because she refuses, under a religious pretext, to sign marriage licenses, won't do her job, and for some reason in America this is something that politicians are defending. Now, I've seen a lot of reactions to this. I'm not going to go into it a whole lot of depth and detail. I shared a video yesterday which is a hilarious video of the cell block tango featuring this woman, and basically the whole thing is that it's just bigotry and using religious ground to justify something which is not only illegal but just a form of hate. Basically, it's like, she's decided that she doesn't like gay marriages because God tells her so. And you know, I feel sorry for the Christians who are not full of this crap and are just so sick of the big mouth bigots getting all the attention, because it's nobody's business whom you love as long as it's a consensual, healthy relationship. And you know, if two men are in love or two women are in love, then who is anybody else to say that that love is anything less than anybody else's love? The whole message of most religious spiritual paths is supposed to be, at the core of it, love. And that was interesting for me because it kind of sort of pushed alongside these other two key issues that were coming up. And it's just, you're devaluing the love of someone because of their sexual preference. You're devaluing the worth of someone because of their physical size. You're devaluing the worth of someone because they are feeding their child in public. And it's all very much tied to the idea of sexuality and what we've decided is correct, normal, healthy, spiritually right in our own heads, and it's so judgmental that it's beyond belief. And I was just like lying in bed like sexy. While we're on the subject of being sexy, I was looking good while I was sick. And it just occurred to me, it's like, what is going on in the world right now that we feel the need to sort of have all these stories, all these crazy stories about, wow, you're too fat, well, I don't like your sexuality, well, you shouldn't be breastfeeding in public. You know what? Take that finger, chop it right off. It's just like, stop it. Just stop it. It's like, you know what? If a couple are in love and happy and joyous and, you know, why can't you be happy for them? Are you that low and miserable that you can't be happy for them, just whatever? And are you that low and miserable in your own self-esteem that you have to look at other people and go, you're fat? It's just like, whatever, shoo until you can learn to be a better human being and have a little bit of compassion for people. I don't know. So I guess it was just, I really felt the need, I just needed to talk a little bit about these topics that had presented themselves to me. In terms of a spiritual thesis though, and I think this sort of underpins where I'm coming from on a spiritual level, is I think there is too much of a tendency in society to give ourselves a self-value of higher than anybody else. I was talking a little bit about a narcissistic tendency promoted by society yesterday, and I think that's where this comes from. The idea that people are disposable and are there to serve our needs. And I think we really need to wake up as a people, as a human race, to the idea that people aren't there to serve our personal interest. You know, a person isn't there to fulfill our idea of what is sexually correct. A person isn't there to fulfill our idea of what is physically attractive, and a person isn't there to justify what we think is a loving relationship. A loving relationship between two consenting adults, or more than two, I suppose, if that's what they're into. I don't know. I can only speak from my experience. As long as there is love, then it's absolutely nobody else's business, really. And another person's physical appearance, which we all seem to concentrate on way too much, is absolutely nothing to do with anybody else. And whether or not a woman chooses to feed her child, breastfeed in public, it's nobody else's frigging business to sit there judging them. And it seems ludicrous to me anyway, because that might be the healthiest thing for the child. Thinking about it, it's actually the opposing of what is healthiest often for individuals. Now, in terms of being fat, being overweight is not healthy. However, the Hollywood promoted idea of being a thigh gap size 0 is also not healthy. I'm sorry, it's just not. For most people it is such an unrealistic goal that it basically consumes their whole lives keeping that way, and I don't find it attractive at all. But it's not under my business when the people who are naturally slim, or even people who work to be that way, it's not my job to go around pointing my finger at them and going, you know what, you need to eat something. And that's just would make me just as bad as the people who are like, stop eating. And in terms of, the breastfeeding, that's what's healthiest for the kid. In terms of finding a realistic, healthy goal for your weight, that's what's more realistic and healthy. And in terms of love relationships, what is healthy and correct for the people involved, so there is no shame attached to whomever they love, be it a man loving another man, a woman loving another woman, or a heterosexual relationship, or so on and so forth. Get over yourself, basically. If you really honestly think that you have the right to tell anybody what they can and cannot do, who they can and cannot love, outside of the confines of morality and the law, which, you know, let's not go crazy down the other end of that argument, because I know there are going to be people like, oh, well, if we don't have the right to tell people what to do, then people don't have the right to talk out against murderers and rapists and thieves and stuff. And, you know, that's just ridiculous. You're just taking it and being ridiculous with it. So basically, I think what I wanted to really surmise in this video was just be good to one another. For goodness sake, the world is falling to bits right now. So just be good to one another. Many blessings.